What's up guys, it's me, Jeremy. With the new Devourer enchant being released on the upcoming patch, I think it's likely that we'll start to see a real mix-up in the jungle, mainly due to the item being fairly strong and really fitting in with the playstyle of a reasonable amount of jungle champions. Let's get started. So the first thing to think about is why the new Devourer is so much stronger than the old one, and overall there's a few things to consider. The first is that it starts with a base 30 magic damage on hit rather than a base 25 magic damage on hit, so the early game's a little bit better, making it easier to farm up the stacks, since your early jungle clears are going to be a little bit stronger due to the extra 5 magic damage. And now that it gives 2 stacks for killing the Scuttle Crab and 5 stacks for taking Dragon or Baron, despite only giving 1 stack for a champion killer assist instead of 2 now, it is overall a little bit faster to stack the item than before. And okay, maybe it doesn't have infinite scaling anymore, but going up to 30 stacks is still pretty high, and yes, it does kinda suck that it won't scale to a crazy powerful late game, but I think the trade-off for a better early game is kind of worth it, and honestly is an improvement overall, since the early game is so ridiculously important for a jungler that any help that they can get in the early and mid game is going to have a much bigger impact than something that would take place in the late game. Which leads me into my next point, and it's that the Devourer upgrade once you hit 30 stacks is an insane mid game power spike that happens at an almost perfect time, usually around 20 to 25 minutes into the game, perfect for snowballing the mid game as a jungler. The tooltip is a little confusing, but when it upgrades after 30 stacks, it causes every other auto attack to proc on hit effects twice in that auto attack, including the 60 bonus magic damage on hit that the item brings to the table. It's a really potent effect and gives you a lot of unexpected damage as a jungler, since the power spike seemingly comes out of nowhere, since the power spike isn't really correlated to the same time as a major purchase. It catches a lot of people off guard, and so you can usually end up with a fairly easy kill or two because people don't expect your power. Not to mention that it scales incredibly well with other on-hit items, and can open you up to some massively high DPS builds in team compositions where you as a jungler don't need to build tanky. And so we do have to consider the type of champions building this item. The attack speed oriented junglers, champions who scale well with attack speed and are going to be auto attacking a lot. These champions tend to be somewhat weak in the early game, but become extremely strong in the mid game and still are really good in the late game. And so the new Devourer enchant works really well with the tendencies within the kits of the champions who are going to build the item due to the mid game power spike. And the way a stacking item like Devourer interacts with the playstyle of a jungle player is actually really interesting. When you have an infinite stacking item like the old Devourer, a player would tend to spend way too much time farming, since it's kind of hard to draw the line to know when it's okay to stop worrying about stacking completely, since the item is always going to be in the back of your mind, always there influencing your decision making, saying, hey, come get some more stacks. And quite often you would miss out on at least one crucial team fight in realistically almost every single game because you were worrying about stacking up the item. But now that the stacks cap at 30 and only take around 20 to 25 minutes or so to stack up, which is just about how long the laning phase tends to last, and you get this really clear-cut playstyle of, okay, we have the stacks now, let's go wreck some people, kind of thing, that in a sense makes the jungler a better player by not hindering their decision making to acquire stacks. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I think it's definitely true because stacking up an item infinitely is super cool to do when you get to a crazy stack level, so you would often forego making a good decision because you were trying to farm up stacks. And now that the item caps at 30, I think players are going to have that issue at least a lot less. And in addition, one thing I also noticed is that it adds a really nice element to ultimate reliant junglers. Junglers who absolutely need their ultimate to guarantee a kill on a gank, something like Warwick or maybe Nocturne. And it's cool because you can go for a gank when you get your ultimate, and when it's on cooldown, you go farm up for the stacks, and then you gank again immediately when your ultimate comes up. And normally this style of jungling would have a really hard time making anything of worth happen when their ultimate is on cooldown. And so now it essentially improves the efficiency of an ultimate reliant jungler because it makes the things that you do when your ultimate is on cooldown in the early game reasonably more impactful in that you farm up the stacks to hit your power spike. And Overall, I don't think that this item is too overpowered, but I do think it is pretty much exactly what these attack speed oriented junglers needed to succeed in the meta, especially in solo queue, and they bring a really interesting playstyle that is fairly different to that of a Cinderhulk, Warrior, or Runeglaive jungler, so it's going to bring a lot of jungle champions back into the meta and will definitely lead to some interesting strategies. And speaking of interesting strategies, I actually think Devour as a lane item could potentially be possible if your team's jungler isn't going to farm too much and will allow you to steal their jungle camps, mainly because the item is still quite powerful before it scales up with the 30 stacks, and the Dragon and Scuttlecrab bonuses can really help you stack it quite a bit. It might take a little bit longer to stack up, but you can probably find enough jungle camps, especially if you can get some invades in. I personally didn't really try it in lane since I'm not really sure what champions it might be strong on, but definitely similar to Runeglaive Ezreal, I think the potential for the item to be used on a laner is definitely there, and might be something that we see being used in the future. So what do you think? Is the item overpowered? Leave a comment and let me know. And that just about wraps it up. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button, and you can subscribe for some more awesome content in the future, as well as you can check out some of my other videos on the screen too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.